I still don't know
What?
what happened to Caylee. The only person in this world that matters to me still is my daughter. But I'm still defending the fact that I didn't hurt her. I live it every single day. And no one can ever tell me I should just get over the fact that my daughter isn't here and I've been blamed for her being gone.
The young woman you see became one of the most controversial figures in the United States after the mysterious disappearance of her 3-year-old daughter. Her story is rife with contradictions and controversy, raising more questions than answers. The case of Casey Anthony is considered one of the defining trials of the century, polarizing conversations in households across the nation and around the world. We invite you to watch until the end for all the details of this gripping case. What drives a person to commit unspeakable acts against their own kid? Caylee Marie Anthony was born on August 9th, 2005 in Orlando, Florida. Her mother, Casey Anthony, was a young woman who became pregnant unexpectedly and never revealed the identity of the child's father. At just 19, Casey kept her pregnancy a secret from her father, George, a police officer, and her mother, Cindy, even as her appearance changed and her weight increased. Although they noticed these changes, George and Cindy chose not to press her for answers, allowing her some space. It was ultimately Casey's brother who confronted her, leading to the revelation of her pregnancy. Despite the circumstances, George and Cindy were concerned for their daughter's health and did not pressure her. By the time the family learned about the pregnancy, Casey was already several months along. George focused on ensuring both Casey and the unborn child were healthy, but the family faced significant challenges. George and Cindy's marriage was strained. George had lost his job due to gambling debts, prompting Cindy to ask him to leave. As time passed and baby Caylee was born, the family came together to care for her. After 10 months, Cindy forgave George and he returned home to help raise their granddaughter. They seemed to find a new family dynamic centered around the joy Caylee brought, which helped restore some peace in their lives. However, Casey's behavior occasionally raised concerns. For instance, when George discovered that Casey had lied about working at a sporting goods store, he questioned her, but she deflected. Still, there was no doubt about her love for Caylee, and her parents overlooked her odd behaviors, such as leaving the house without explanation. Caylee grew into a bright and charming little girl, captivating everyone with her sweetness. Like many girls her age, she enjoyed drawing, playing with dolls, and dressing up. In mid-June 2008, to celebrate Father's Day, Cindy took Caylee to visit her father in a nursing home. After a lovely afternoon, Cindy and Casey tucked Caylee into bed that night, unaware it would be the last time they would do so as a complete family. A few hours later, Casey sent a text to her mother, claiming she would be working late and would leave Caylee with a babysitter named Zenaida Gonzalez. The following morning, Cindy left for work, and George prepared breakfast for his daughter and granddaughter. After they departed, Caylee would never be seen alive again that week, and neither Casey nor Caylee returned to her parents' home. The days following Caylee's disappearance were marked by confusion and tension. Casey's reluctance to provide clear answers to her parents raised suspicion. The police were soon involved, and the search for Caylee began in earnest. As the investigation unfolded, numerous inconsistencies in Casey's accounts were revealed, further fueling public scrutiny. The case captured national attention, leading to a media frenzy. Questions swirled around Casey's behavior and her relationship with her daughter. Did she truly care for Caylee, or was there something more sinister at play? As the trial approached, the nation watched closely, eager to learn the truth behind the young mother and her missing child. In the summer of 2008, Casey Anthony told her family she was on a trip to reconnect with an old friend, and her absence was initially accepted without much concern. However, when she returned home without her 3-year-old daughter, Caylee, her father, George, became suspicious. Despite his worries, he assumed Caylee was with a babysitter or friend. George chose to use this opportunity to question Casey about some missing fuel drums he believed she had taken. But before he could get a clear answer, Casey left again without further explanation. As days turned into weeks without any word from Casey or Caylee, George and his wife Cindy grew increasingly alarmed and began trying to track down their daughter and granddaughter. Nearly a month after Caylee was last seen, Cindy and George found Casey staying at a friend's house. She had recently begun a new relationship with a young man named Tony Lazaro, whom she met online. Lazaro shared an apartment with a few roommates, and during this period Casey was reportedly spending significant time with him, acting as if nothing was wrong. When George and Cindy pressed Casey about Kay's whereabouts, she evaded their questions and gave vague, conflicting answers. Later that same day, the worried grandparents located Casey's car in a tow lot, 31 days after Caylee had last been seen. When George opened the car door, he was overwhelmed by a nauseating smell that he described as decomposition. It was on that day, mid-July 2008, that Caylee was officially reported missing. Cindy Anthony, in a panicked state, called 911 and informed the operator that Casey had been evasive and unreliable about her granddaughter's whereabouts, finally admitting she hadn't seen Caylee for weeks. Cindy described a concerning odour from Casey's car, which she likened to the smell of death. Her mention of this odour finally prompted a response from law enforcement. Shortly afterward, Casey made her own 911 call, claiming that a babysitter named Zenaida Gonzalez had taken Caylee against her will on June 9th. Investigators followed up on Casey's story, visiting the supposed address of this babysitter, but found it abandoned. After a thorough search, they located Zenaida Gonzalez and discovered that she had no connection to Casey or Caylee. Further surveillance footage from the building confirmed that Casey hadn't been there on the date she claimed her daughter was taken. Meanwhile, Casey's actions during the search for her daughter only deepened suspicions. She was seen attending parties, participating in a nightclub beauty contest, and celebrating with friends while her daughter was supposedly missing. Notably, she even got a tattoo reading Bella Vita, meaning beautiful life in Italian. As police interrogated her, Casey's story fell apart. She claimed to work at Universal Studios, but was unable to produce any evidence of employment there. In fact, investigators found she had left the job 3 years earlier and hadn't returned. After multiple interrogations that revealed more contradictions, Casey was arrested for providing false statements to the police, child neglect, and obstruction of a criminal investigation. Initially denied bail, she was later released under a $500,000 bond fitted with an electronic tracking device. The judge, however, made it clear he felt Casey showed disregard for the welfare of her daughter. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they announced they believed Caylee may have suffered a tragic fate, though they continued their search. In October, prosecutors brought formal charges against Casey for first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter, and 4 counts of lying to law enforcement. Casey pleaded not guilty. In jailhouse phone calls, Casey claimed to her family that her lies were all motivated by fear, though she would not clarify her statements further. During an emotional conversation with her brother, Casey pleaded for help in finding Caylee, saying she longed to hear her daughter's laugh again. In December 2008, nearly 6 months after Caylee's disappearance, a utility worker discovered skeletal remains in a wooded area near the Anthony family's home. The body, hidden in a trash bag and wrapped in a blanket, was accompanied by duct tape over the mouth, which led the medical examiner to suspect foul play. Further evidence was collected over the next few days, and the remains were identified as Caylee's through forensic testing. Though the specific cause of death couldn't be determined, the duct tape suggested intentional harm. The discovery triggered an avalanche of media coverage, sparking debates online and dividing public opinion. Casey continued to assert that Caylee had drowned in the family's pool, but her story continued to shift, raising more doubts. Casey's trial began in 2011, and as a high-profile case, it drew extensive media attention. An estimated 40 million Americans watched at least part of the 6-week trial. Casey's defense attorney, Jose Baez, framed the tragedy as an accidental drowning, arguing that Caylee's death was not murder but a tragic accident. Baez claimed that Casey's father, George, had helped cover up the incident using his experience as a former police officer. The defense also alleged Casey was a victim of sexual abuse by both her father and her brother, which they argued had led to Casey's deep-seated issues and habitual lying. This strategy shocked the public, but no evidence was presented to corroborate these claims. George denied any abuse and struggled emotionally throughout the proceedings. The prosecution painted a different picture, arguing that Casey wanted freedom from her role as a single mother and deliberately harmed her daughter to achieve it. They claimed Casey had used chloroform to sedate Caylee before placing duct tape over her mouth to suffocate her. The prosecution depicted Casey as a manipulative liar who had repeatedly deceived her family and friends to cover up her actions. Various witnesses were called to testify. Tony Lazzaro, Casey's boyfriend at the time of Kay's disappearance, testified that Casey had never mentioned her daughter's disappearance to him. Lazzaro's roommates recalled seeing Casey as a loving mother who seemed engaged and happy when Caylee was around, but were stunned by the revelation that she hadn't reported Caylee missing for an entire month. A friend of Lazzaro's who had occasionally babysat Caylee recounted how the child had loved swimming in the pool of their apartment complex, a detail that gave weight to the defence's claim that Caylee may have drowned. One particularly dramatic moment in the trial occurred when a jailhouse recording captured Casey tearfully asking her family for help, expressing how much she missed her daughter. Casey's parents, who had been her strongest supporters, displayed signs of strain, their own pain evident as they navigated the family's turmoil. Their emotions, caught on camera and broadcast nationwide, became an integral part of the case's public spectacle. Despite compelling arguments from both sides, the jury deliberated for less than 11 hours before delivering a shocking verdict. Casey was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated manslaughter, and aggravated child abuse. She was, however, convicted on 4 counts of lying to the police. Public reaction was swift and intense, with many expressing disbelief and outrage at what they saw as a miscarriage of justice. Casey's acquittal remains one of the most controversial verdicts in recent American history. While her defense team maintained she was simply misunderstood and haunted by childhood trauma, skeptics pointed to the circumstantial evidence and her inconsistent statements. During Casey Anthony's trial, her then-boyfriend Tony Lazzaro and others who had partied with her around the time of Caylee's disappearance took the stand. Tony and other witnesses testified that at no point did Casey seem distressed or mention her daughter was missing. She appeared carefree and her behaviour raised suspicions about her role in Caylee's disappearance. Yet those who knew her described her as an attentive mother, complicating the prosecution's efforts to portray her as indifferent and selfish. The prosecution argued that Casey's motive was rooted in her desire for freedom, presenting evidence that, in the days leading up to Caylee's disappearance, Casey conducted internet searches on terms like suffocation and foolproof ways to harm. These searches, they alleged, suggested she may have been contemplating ways to kill her daughter. The prosecution also played disturbing audio and video recordings in which Casey, first claiming that her daughter had been kidnapped by a nanny, later stated she didn't know what happened to her, and finally suggested Caylee had drowned. The jury was shown photos of Caylee's decomposed body, found near Casey's home. Despite the gruesome evidence, the cause of death could not be determined, which proved critical in swaying the jury's decision. With the entire country watching, Casey's defense team faced a difficult decision: should Casey testify? Taking the stand would require her to explain her behavior, convince the jury of her innocence, and recount her claims of childhood sexual abuse by her father, which the defense argued was the root of her psychological struggles. Given her history of lying, her attorneys feared her testimony might harm her case. In the end, they decided Casey would not testify, hoping her silence might strengthen their argument that there was simply no concrete evidence tying her to Caylee's death. On July 5th, 2011, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict that shocked the nation. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of murdering her daughter. However, she was convicted on 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. Nearly 100 million people watched the verdict unfold live, with reactions ranging from shock to outrage. Many believed the jury had failed to grasp the significance of reasonable doubt, while others argued that the prosecution had failed to present clear, irrefutable evidence. The lack of a concrete cause of death, in particular, was a critical factor in the jury's decision to acquit Casey of murder. Casey, only 25 years old, was released from jail 2 weeks later. The trial, quickly labelled the trial of the century, left an indelible mark on American society. Dubbed America's most hated mother, Casey became a divisive figure, sparking endless debate. Even the judge presiding over her case expressed disbelief, feeling that there was enough evidence for a conviction. He believed Casey presented 2 faces, one that appeared publicly, aiming to win over the jury, and another that emerged in private moments. Following her release, Casey's relationships with her family deteriorated. George, her father, stopped all communication with her, while her mother Cindy, though heartbroken, maintained some minimal contact. 2 years later, Zenaida Gonzalez, the woman Casey accused of being Caylee's supposed nanny and kidnapper, filed a defamation lawsuit against Casey. However, the case ultimately went nowhere, and Zenaida's life took a sharp turn. In January 2016, she was arrested for theft after allegedly using a cancer patient's credit card to make unauthorized purchases. In 2017, Cindy and George Anthony gave an exclusive interview, publicly sharing their perspectives on what had happened. They offered differing theories. Cindy believed in the pool accident story Casey told, while George thought Caylee had been given a sedative by Casey, resulting in her death. He speculated that Casey stored Caylee's body in the car trunk for several days before ultimately disposing of it. During the interview, George also spoke about his failed suicide attempt, a result of the overwhelming grief, loss of Caylee, and accusations from Casey herself. He described writing a farewell letter and consuming a large quantity of barbiturates, only to survive the attempt. This emotional confession painted a tragic picture of a family shattered by tragedy and distrust. Later, new evidence emerged, fueling more speculation. It was revealed that someone in the Anthony home had searched foolproof suffocation on the internet the day Caylee disappeared. This detail aligned with the prosecution's theory that Caylee's death involved suffocation, but Cindy and George believed it was possible that someone other than Casey conducted the search. Cindy avoided pointing fingers publicly, but admitted she was no longer blind to her daughter's pattern of deceit. George, meanwhile, suspected Casey had started engaging in deceptive behavior as early as high school. In 2013, Casey was given the chance to tell her side of the story in an exclusive interview with a leading news agency. For the first time, she spoke about her daughter's death, claiming she still did not fully understand what had happened to Caylee. She also shared a surprising detail. During her bankruptcy filing in 2013, she had sold the rights to her story for $25,000, preventing her from discussing the case publicly without permission from the company that acquired them. Later, she regretted the interview, attempting to retract her statements, but it was too late. Her comment that she felt at peace and slept well at night intensified public anger, and many questioned her apparent lack of remorse. In 2018, George suffered a near-fatal car accident that left him with spinal and brain injuries. This life-changing event softened his stance on his daughter, and he expressed a desire for reconciliation, stating he would welcome a visit from her. In response, Caylee gave an interview where she bluntly said that one visit would not be enough to heal their relationship, adding that George needed to admit certain things first. Cindy, meanwhile, had finally decided to end communication with Caylee, focusing solely on caring for George, who was struggling with the after effects of the accident, including memory loss and confusion. Reflecting on her turbulent past, Cindy described her decision to cut ties with Caylee as mutual and explained that she felt happier without her in her life. Although she thought of Caylee often, she said she no longer wanted to live in the past. Amid these personal struggles, Caylee resurfaced with a new documentary, appearing alongside her former defense team, whom she now considered her surrogate family. At the time, Caylee was in a relationship with a private investigator named Patrick, who encouraged her to start a photography business. Despite public opinion, Caylee stated that she was unbothered by what people thought of her, and even mentioned she might consider having another child. A reporter who had covered Caylee's trial speculated that her return to the public eye might be financially motivated, suggesting that Caylee hoped to profit from her tragic story. In a subsequent television interview, Caylee made a shocking claim, directly accusing her father, George, of causing Caylee's death to cover up alleged abuse. This accusation reignited public outrage, as many debated whether Caylee was manipulating the story to clear her name or if there was any truth to her claims. Recently, Caylee's relationship with Patrick ended and she began dating someone she met at the gym. Her case, however, remains one of the most polarizing in US history, inspiring numerous books, documentaries and television specials. The tragic story of Caylee Anthony, a little girl caught in a tragic series of events, continues to haunt the nation, a case forever associated with mystery, distrust and unanswered questions. Now, with all the facts and testimonies laid out, the public remains divided. Did justice fail Caylee? Or did Caylee's acquittal reveal flaws in the legal system? And will the full truth about what happened to the young, innocent Joe Connell, an ambitious young American, and Olga, a captivating Russian woman, seemed to have it all: beauty, wealth, and a love that looked like the American dream come to life. Shortly after marrying, they set off on a romantic journey to the Virgin Islands, unaware that an invisible clock had started ticking down their days of happiness. They were given just 107 days before fate would step in, turning their dream into a test of resilience. Joe's childhood in Wilmington, Delaware was lively yet turbulent, marked by frequent arguments with his siblings John and Kelly. When his parents separated, Joe and his siblings stayed with their mother, who later remarried. The family settled into a peaceful life, and as the siblings grew, they formed a closer bond. Joe grew into a responsible and driven young man, balancing his social charm with a focused approach to business. Alongside his best friend Christopher, Joe co-owned a successful car repair shop. With determination, they turned the business into a thriving venture. Joe met Olga online. Both were in their 30s and had endured failed relationships, but they quickly found a deep connection despite the distance. Olga's lively, warm nature and shared values resonated with Joe, who found himself rethinking his life goals. Their bond grew, and Olga soon moved from Siberia to the United States to be with Joe. In person, Joe was captivated by her beauty and gentleness. His family quickly warmed to Olga, seeing strength beneath her delicate appearance and hoping she would bring calm into Joe's life. But as their relationship advanced, a family tradition brought tension. According to custom, the bride would inherit the mother's ring, which had been passed to Joe's sister Kelly for her wedding years ago. Valued at $20,000, the ring became a source of conflict when Joe secretly replaced its diamonds with zirconia, placing the real gems in a new ring for Olga. Kelly discovered the switch and was upset, leading to a rift. Despite this, Joe and Olga proceeded with their wedding in the Virgin Islands, though Kelly's absence and pointed messages added tension. Olga, unaware of the ring switch, was hurt by the conflict with her new sister-in-law. Not long after the wedding, the couple's home was broken into. Many valuables and family heirlooms were taken, but Olga's ring remained untouched. The police investigation went nowhere, suggesting a skilled thief was involved. This incident marked the beginning of a series of challenges. Returning from their honeymoon in the Caribbean, Joe and Olga indulged in a lavish lifestyle, buying a luxurious Mercedes worth over $100,000. Joe's business was bringing in nearly $1 million annually, and Olga, with her background as a stockbroker, joined the business, taking on an administrative role. Her charm and professionalism quickly won over clients, adding to the success of their joint venture. Yet, as new challenges emerged, Joe and Olga would face a series of trials that would test the resilience of their love and partnership in unexpected ways. Their journey had begun like a fairy tale, but fate had other plans. The coming months would reveal whether Joe and Olga could withstand the tests ahead, or if the dream would unravel, leaving only memories of what once seemed like a perfect life. On September 23, 2013, just 3 months after their wedding, an unimaginable tragedy struck Joseph and Olga's lives in Wilmington, Delaware. The night had started as a celebration of Olga's 39th birthday, a joyful occasion marked by dancing and laughter, as the couple gathered with friends and some of Joe's family members at a nearby bar. The newlyweds were in high spirits as they left the party late that night, heading home in their convertible, completely unaware of the calamity that lay ahead. Around 2 a.m., the peaceful early morning was shattered when emergency services received an alarming call. A witness reported a disturbing scene near a condominium complex in the Paladin Club area. Within minutes, paramedics arrived at the scene, where they encountered Olga in a state of panic. They tried desperately to save her, but tragically, she succumbed to her injuries en route to the hospital. Just a short distance away, Joseph was found lying unconscious and unresponsive among the bushes near the path. Investigators quickly determined that this was no accident. Evidence suggested a targeted attack, and the investigation began to unfold. As detectives combed the scene, they discovered multiple metal objects scattered nearby, leading them to believe that more than one person had been involved. The variety of weapons used indicated a coordinated attack, ruling out the possibility of a random assault. A crucial observation was that no items of value were missing from the couple. Olga's purse, containing a large sum of cash, and her phone was untouched, and her wedding ring, worth thousands, remained on her finger. This lack of robbery led investigators to the chilling conclusion that the perpetrator's sole purpose was to inflict harm on the couple. Witnesses reported hearing two loud male voices arguing shortly before the incident. However, despite hearing the noise, no one had seen the attack itself, leaving the police with a daunting challenge. Detectives believed that Joseph and Olga had likely been ambushed as they returned home from the bar, parking their car on the side of the road and walking toward the entrance of their condo. Olga was the only potential witness who might have identified their attackers, but she was unable to respond to investigators' questions before passing. Seeking any possible motives, detectives delved into the couple's lives. Joseph's mother and stepfather assured authorities that neither Joseph nor Olga had enemies capable of such violence. Both were known to be friendly and conflict-averse, and no disputes had been reported by friends or family. Yet one possible motive came up repeatedly: a dispute between Joseph and his sister Caylee over a valuable ring. Family members recalled tension over the heirloom, suggesting that it might have been a factor in the attack. The investigation intensified as detectives began questioning Caylee. Suspiciously, she was one of the first to arrive at the scene, despite living across town. She appeared distressed, though cooperative, openly sharing details of her recent arguments with Joseph and Olga. Text messages revealed a heated exchange between Olga and Caylee, with Olga accusing her sister-in-law of stealing valuables, accusations that Caylee vehemently denied. However, detectives noted that Caylee's alibi seemed strong, as she had been recovering from an illness and recent medical treatment, leaving her physically weak. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Caylee remained a person of interest, her apparent motive rooted in family conflict and possible greed. As investigators pursued this lead, they also considered the possibility of jealousy as a motive. Perhaps someone from Joseph or Olga's past harbored a vendetta or a broken heart. Detectives looked into both of their histories, but Olga's connections in the US were limited, making it unlikely that someone from abroad would seek revenge. Joseph's past relationships also provided no suspects, as his former girlfriends had moved on with their lives. With no evidence to support this angle, detectives turned back to the dispute over the ring, suspecting that it might be the key to solving the case. The investigation took another turn when detectives questioned Joseph's brother-in-law, Garrett. He admitted to knowing about the tension over the ring but denied any involvement in the attack. According to Garrett, Caylee had been home recuperating on the night of the incident, providing her with a solid alibi. Yet Garrett's testimony brought another theory to light. He hinted that Joseph might have had dealings that extended beyond the law, suggesting that he was involved in activities that could have put him and Olga in danger. Investigators soon uncovered evidence supporting Garrett's suspicions. Joseph had been selling illegal drugs, generating a significant, albeit secret, income. This revelation complicated the picture, introducing a whole new set of potential motives and suspects. Detectives learned that Joseph's business partner, Chris Rivers, had long harbored suspicions about Joseph's financial honesty. Chris resented Joseph for allegedly withholding profits from their shared business, which led to tensions between the two men. On the night of the attack, Chris had planned to join Joseph and Olga at the bar, but claimed he was delayed due to business matters. When questioned, Chris's demeanour was notably detached. Despite having been Joseph's friend and business partner for over a decade, Chris displayed little emotion over the tragedy, which investigators found odd. Chris shared information that further fueled suspicions, mentioning rumours about Olga's connections with certain Russian circles, which could have contributed to the family's financial stability. According to Chris, Joseph's drug dealings had gained him enemies within the criminal underworld. The conflicts over money and business operations could have easily led to violence. The detectives delved into Joseph's past and discovered that he had a criminal record, including a brief incarceration several years before for illegal firearm possession. This past, combined with his current involvement in drug trafficking, painted a much darker picture of Joseph's life than his loved ones had known. As the investigation progressed, detectives found themselves navigating a maze of potential motives and suspects. Each new lead added another layer of complexity. The simple, happy image of Joseph and Olga was gradually replaced by a web of hidden associations, secrets, and conflicts. Though Joseph and Olga appeared to be a blissful couple with no known enemies, their hidden dealings hinted at darker connections. During subsequent interrogations, detectives revisited their initial suspects, scrutinizing each statement for inconsistencies. The investigation's focus oscillated between family disputes, potential romantic jealousy, and Joseph's criminal connections. The detectives meticulously examined each theory, leaving no stone unturned. Despite these efforts, concrete evidence remained elusive, and suspects continued to evade prosecution. Chris Rivers, in particular, remained an enigmatic figure in the investigation. His conflicting accounts and surprising lack of grief led detectives to question his role in the tragedy. Although he denied any involvement, Chris's long-standing tension with Joseph over money and business added a sinister undertone to his relationship with the couple. Investigators speculated that if Chris had indeed been responsible, he would have had both the motive and knowledge to plan an attack that would remain unsolved. Throughout the investigation, detectives also re-examined the possible involvement of Caylee. Her alibi had initially held strong, yet her swift arrival at the crime scene and strained relationship with Joseph and Olga kept her under suspicion. Although she lacked a clear opportunity to commit the crime, detectives considered the possibility that she might have orchestrated the attack by hiring someone else. However, as weeks passed, investigators found no evidence linking her directly to the crime. The probe into Joseph's life unearthed connections to the criminal underworld that appeared to widen the pool of suspects. Associates from his illicit dealings revealed strained partnerships, with many individuals having reasons to harbour resentment. Investigators questioned multiple individuals connected to these activities, uncovering a long list of possible motives from financial betrayal to personal vendettas. As days turned to weeks, the investigation became a labyrinth of intersecting motives, potential leads, and lingering suspicions. The tragic deaths of Joseph and Olga had initially seemed inexplicable, but with each revelation a clearer yet darker picture emerged. Joseph and Olga were living what appeared to be a blissful life together, especially after their recent wedding. 3 months into their marriage, however, tragedy struck on the night of Olga's 39th birthday. They had celebrated with friends at a local bar, filled with laughter, dancing, and the promise of a bright future. The couple was riding home in their convertible, the night still young and full of possibilities, when the unthinkable happened. Around 2 a.m. on September 23, 2013, a call to emergency services shattered their happiness. Paramedics rushed to a condominium in Wilmington where they found Olga in distress, screaming for help. Despite their efforts to save her, she succumbed to her injuries before reaching the hospital. Joseph, meanwhile, was discovered nearby, unconscious and unresponsive. The investigators on the scene immediately sensed foul play, particularly given the blood-spattered evidence scattered around the crime scene. Detectives were puzzled by the details surrounding the couple's assault. Witnesses reported hearing shouts and loud arguments, suggesting a violent confrontation. However, no one had seen the attackers, leaving investigators with little to go on. Their initial inquiries led them to Joseph's sister, Caylee, who was soon implicated due to a recent feud she had with her brother over a valuable family heirloom, a diamond wedding ring. Tensions had escalated between them, but despite her suspicious behavior, arriving at the scene almost immediately after the attack, Caylee maintained her innocence. Investigators wondered whether she could have acted out of jealousy or spite, but the absence of concrete evidence against her made it difficult to pursue that lead. The investigation quickly turned towards the idea that Joseph and Olga might have been targeted. The crime scene showed signs of a violent struggle, but no signs of robbery were apparent. All of their valuables, including Joseph's wallet stuffed with cash and Olga's expensive wedding ring, remained untouched. Detectives considered various angles, delving into the couple's past relationships, personal disputes, and any lingering connections that might have motivated someone to harm them. As they combed through the couple's life, they discovered Joseph had a checkered past involving a bar fight where he had brandished a weapon for self-defense. This incident marked the beginning of Joseph's entanglement with a dark underbelly of society, leading him into the dangerous world of steroid trafficking. Following his arrest in the bar incident, Joseph found himself interacting with individuals involved in the illegal sale of performance-enhancing substances. When he was released from custody, Joseph was drawn into this world not just as an acquaintance but as a participant in the burgeoning underground trade of sports supplements. While he became somewhat of a recognized figure in this illicit market, investigators began to wonder if his newfound notoriety could have put him in the crosshairs of danger. The possibility that Joseph had crossed paths with individuals engaged in the darker aspects of this business left the detectives searching for connections that could explain the attack. As the investigation progressed, they uncovered a man named Harry Cook, who had previously invested a significant sum of over $100,000 into a car business with Joseph. Harry lived nearby, and while he had a solid alibi for the time of the murders, his financial investment in the venture made him a person of interest. The detectives scrutinized the partnership further, only to find the business struggling financially despite its apparent success. Detailed audits revealed significant discrepancies in the accounts, raising questions about embezzlement. As the detectives continued their probing, their investigation led them to Joseph's business partner, Chris Rivers. Reports indicated that Chris had developed a severe addiction to drugs, which, when coupled with the growing resentment towards Joseph, created a potential motive for foul play. Chris's addiction issues had escalated to the point where he had begun embezzling from the business to fund his habit. The once healthy partnership between Joseph and Chris had soured, with Chris growing increasingly paranoid about Joseph's success and their shared finances. The investigators began to piece together that Chris's desperation could have pushed him to conspire against his partner. Their scrutiny of Chris's financial dealings revealed that he had accrued massive debts and might be inclined to eliminate Joseph to regain control of their business and access potential life insurance payouts. The thought of such a betrayal, planned by someone so close, left investigators determined to explore every lead. As they delved deeper, detectives found Chris's mobile phone records revealing an alarming pattern. His call logs from the night of the attack indicated numerous communications with Josh Bay, a known client of Chris who had been purchasing steroids. The significance of these calls heightened investigators' suspicions. Josh, it turned out, had also gone missing around the time of the murders, which suggested a deeper conspiracy at play. The web of deceit started to take shape as the detectives learned about Aaron Thompson and Dominic Benton, two men associated with Chris. They realized that this trio, along with Bay, formed a network of individuals who could be tied to the conspiracy. The more the investigators learned about Josh, the clearer it became that he might have been involved in the plot against Joseph and Olga, perhaps motivated by money or drugs. The breaking point in the investigation came when Josh Bay unexpectedly surrendered to law enforcement. His testimony turned the case on its head. Josh revealed that Chris had hired him to eliminate both Joseph and Olga. According to Bay, Chris provided a down payment of $5,000 with a promise of an additional $60,000 upon completion of the murders. He confessed to having coordinated the attack and implicated Aaron and Dominic as the ones who executed the plan. Chris's insatiable greed, coupled with his deteriorating mental state and spiraling addiction, had driven him to betray his best friend in the most heinous manner imaginable. The detectives now had the evidence they needed to connect Chris directly to the crime. As investigators prepared to build their case, they discovered Chris's numerous attempts to cover his tracks, leading them to the crime scene's chaotic aftermath. His deceitful narrative about Joseph's possible involvement in the steroid trade fell apart as they gathered evidence that contradicted his claims. The detectives meticulously documented the timeline, tracking down surveillance footage that placed Chris at the center of suspicious behavior on the night of the attack. This footage showed him pacing nervously, constantly checking his phone, as if waiting for updates on the progress of the heinous plan he had orchestrated. Throughout the investigation, Chris had attempted to manipulate the narrative by falsely implicating others, including making suggestions that family disputes might have led to the tragic event. However, the diligent work of the investigators ensured that they saw through his attempts at deception. They collected and analyzed evidence that ultimately led to the truth, revealing the layers of betrayal surrounding Joseph and Olga's murders. The picture became clearer. Chris had been desperate enough to conspire against his own business partner, driven by jealousy and a deep-seated need to escape his financial woes. The trials that followed were harrowing for all involved. In the courtroom, testimonies were heard, and the full extent of the betrayal became apparent. Aaron Thompson was found guilty and sentenced to 2 life terms, plus an additional 45 years for his role in the murder. Dominic, who had not directly engaged in violence against the couple, received a 5-year sentence for his involvement in the conspiracy. Chris Rivers, however, faced the harshest judgment, receiving a life sentence plus an additional 50 years as the mastermind of the plot. His plans, meticulously laid out yet utterly devoid of humanity, had led to the tragic loss of Joseph and Olga, 2 people who had sought only happiness in their lives. Throughout this turmoil, Caylee faced her own trials. Initially suspected of complicity in the crime due to her fraught relationship with her brother, she struggled under the weight of grief and suspicion. The investigators' scrutiny took an emotional toll on her, but she ultimately prevailed, proving her innocence. In the aftermath of the trials, the community was left to process the tragedy that had unfolded. Families were shattered, lives forever altered by greed and betrayal. Caylee found solace in her memories of Joseph, struggling to come to terms with the loss of her brother and the pain that had engulfed their family. The tragic story of Joseph and Olga serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly ordinary lives. It underscores the impact of unchecked ambition, addiction, and betrayal, illuminating how quickly joy can turn to despair. In the end, the search for justice prevailed, but the scars left on those who loved the couple would remain, a somber legacy of a love cut short by the machinations of a deeply flawed man. As the trials concluded, the community rallied together, honoring the memory of Joseph and Olga while vowing to protect each other from the shadows that had threatened to consume them.